I think it's really important that we be more proactive in emergency management. And one way that we can do that is to focus more on land use planning and mitigation activities. So it's critical that we look at where the best place is to locate our homes and our businesses out of the floodplain, away from an industrial plant, away from the railroad tracks if that's possible. And we've seen just recently with some of the flooding and extra moisture that we've had last year, homes that have basically been washed down the mountain. And so that's a good reminder that we need to be very careful of where we're locating homes. Obviously, in some cases, we can't do those things, but where we can, we should, to reduce vulnerability to disasters. I think there's a lot of reasons why vulnerability is increasing. First of all, we have more people. We are growing like crazy. There's a lot of people moving to Utah because of our economy, our way of life. And so even if the natural hazards remain the same, we might have more disaster impacts and more injuries or deaths. In addition, we have more property. So if you have an earthquake now versus 60 years ago, there's more homes, there's more cars, there's more TVs and things like that to be damaged. In addition, we have a population that is becoming older, and we know that older individuals aren't able to necessarily take care of themselves in a disaster situation. And so I'm really concerned, for example, about nursing homes and how nursing homes will be able to care for those victims. And then we also know that poverty is a reason why people are vulnerable. They live in dangerous, dilapidated housing, or they lack insurance, and so they're not able to either prevent a disaster or, respond and recover effectively when they occur. I grew up being very interested in international issues. My parents had traveled quite a bit, and we had some exchange students live with us. So I thought I was going to go into international relations, and that's what I did for my graduate degree. However, in the mid-90s, we had a major earthquake in California, followed by another major earthquake in Japan. And I looked at these countries who were wealthy, stable politically, who had resources, and a lot of things going for them. And I wondered what a disaster would be like in a developing nation and how the international community would respond to disasters. So when I was a graduate student, I went down to Peru to study the El Nino flooding and mudslides. That was really fascinating and interesting. Shortly after that, I went to the Dominican Republic to study Hurricane George. And since then, I've done a lot of field research. I've been in disasters in California, in Texas, in Utah. I went up to 9/11 after that occurred and went to Ground Zero and got to interview a bunch of practitioners and professionals who had responded to that event. And I've been able to publish quite a bit in terms of books and articles. And that's been really fun and fascinating for me to learn and then also contribute to this really important profession. So I had an opportunity to do some research with some graduate students here at Utah Valley University. We were able to go down to Texas and to interview emergency managers in the Dallas area, also in Houston. It was a really interesting disaster because you had this major cold front that came in, accompanied with snow and ice. And because of that, the power was lost throughout the state. And so a lot of water pipes broke and water mains broke and led to flooding, in buildings and outside of buildings. So it was a really interesting case looking at how complex disasters can be and how the communities responded to those events. I think there's several goals for the research projects that we do. First of all, we want to provide an educational opportunity to our students so that they get to see emergency management and disasters from a different lens, outside of the classroom, beyond textbooks, for example. They get to hear what emergency managers are saying directly and ask them questions. They get to participate in a project that will result in a publication, and fortunately our work was published in 2 different articles in important journals. And then beyond that, we also want to do other things. I want to take that information and then share it with my students in the class. And then we want to share that research with scholars and practitioners in the field so that they're more educated about what's going on and what needs to be done to deal with future disasters. It's really interesting to teach emergency management and study disasters and terrorist attacks and those types of things. On the one hand, in some ways, I'm a professional paranoid. I'm worried about what could occur, and I think with good reason. There's many factors that are creating vulnerability and a future with more disasters and worse impacts. On the other hand, I'm optimistic. We've made a lot of progress in emergency management. It's a relatively new field and profession, but we have a long way to go, and I think education is really important to help us to get to that next level.